I want to use this space here to show you how you can layer rounds of blanket stitches on top of each other, and that works very well with these motifs. So I'll put my hoop there, trying to use up every bit of this fabric so that in a while it will be full of all kinds of ways to use the blanket stitch. Well, what color? Let's do the dark red again. Tie a knot. And I'll first start with this motif, and again I will draw a circle on the fabric to give me some guidance on where I can put my stitches. Now, just the first one, I'm going to make these rays again, going clockwise. And this time, because I want to layer more colors on top of that, I'm not making, I'm leaving a bit of space between the spokes. So I'm making this one with less rays than I did with this one. I hope I'm not stitching too fast and that this pace is comfortable for you to stitch along. And else, I hope you will use the pause button if you need to catch up. And I think this space can be filled with 2 stitches, I'm thinking. And the last one to close this circle. Coming up exactly where I came up the first time. And going down. Now, I'm choosing to let this thread hang so I can use it when I want to show something else. That's always a bit of a danger because your thread might get caught in the stitches on the back, but we'll see. And taking another color, brown this time. And now I'm ready to do the second layer. And the circle for the second layer, I'm going to make that slightly bigger than this first dark red circle, because if I would make it exactly the same, I would constantly pierce this red thread and it would completely disappear, but I also think that stitching will be harder because of that. So now I start in between two of the spokes, little to the left, because I want to add a third color, and just outside of the first circle. And I'm going to make a new stitch here very close to the red one. So I leave enough space for the third color later. And this can also be a little bit longer, a little bit outside of that, because I'm also coming up a little bit outside of the inner circle. So the new stitches in brown are coming rather close to the red ones, leaving enough space on this side for another color. And by holding the thread with my left hand thumb like this, it's easy to control the fact that the thread will be always behind the needle. Going around and making spokes in this second color. And nearly there. The last stitch here. And going down just outside that last stitch in the brown circle. So now I have a brown and a red thread, and I think it would be nice to have an orange thread as a top layer. I usually tend, when I work in layers, to have the darkest color first and then layer lighter colors on top. It's not necessary, you can of course do it the other way around, but this way the light colors give a bit of a shiny pop, give a bit of pop of color and make the motif shine. But that's perhaps just my personal preference. And again, the last layer, and I have just a little bit of space left here between the brown and the red, and that's where it's going. My needle is going to pop up with the orange thread. And again, my circle with the orange thread will be a little bit outside of the brown one. And I can just place my stitches in the space that was left open. You can also, if you like, do this randomly, so that it's not always red, brown, orange, red, brown, orange, but a random sequence of colors. So I fill in the gaps that were left open in the two previous rounds. As you can see, the circle, the orange thread that now forming on the inside, is significantly bigger than the first red circle. And personally, I do think that this kind of layering, rows of blanket stitch, has a really nice effect. The last one, coming up exactly at the point where I came up with the orange thread the first time. And going down, just outside it in the circle. And now I have made a layered motif with several colors in the blanket stitch. And I can do something similar with the motif with where the spokes are inward, like with a wheel. And let's place it here. I start with a rather not too big circle, so I have room to expand. So probably with this circle, my spokes will just about touch each other in the middle. Here's my needle, and I will start with the red thread again. Same sequence. And this one, if you remember, is worked anti-clockwise. And this time, I do not have to worry all that much about making my stitches too big, because the other two layers are going to help to keep the stitches in place. So again, I'm leaving sufficiently space between the spokes so that I can fill that up with the other colors. And the last one, going down in the middle and coming up exactly where I started, making the last stitch and going down. Now in this case I can finish my red thread here. I have a bit left that no doubt I can use in one of the other examples. And cut the thread. And now continue with the brown thread. I'm coming up just outside of the circle that I made with the red thread, and a bit to the left of this spoke with enough space left, a bit closer to that one, to put in the orange thread later. And I'm going to make my first stitch by going down here and coming up a bit to the left of this spoke, the second spoke, and outside of the circle. And this is my first stitch in brown. Going down and coming up, meanwhile leaving enough space for an orange thread later. And my spokes aren't starting in the center now, because there's hardly any space there. And that's okay, I'm moving outwards a bit. Where the stitches have the tendency to collapse, I pull them outside a bit and make this new stitch on top of them, and that will keep them in place. And nearly back to the beginning of this round. And the last stitch here in between these two red spokes and coming up at the beginning of the circle. Tucking the thread under, and I can cut it. Now the last one, the orange thread. coming up outside of the brown circle and coming up in between, in the middle of that space that was left open. So about there. And making use of the space that I left open in the red and brown rounds to place my orange threads, and each time coming up outside of the last circle. And not all spaces are completely the same size, small differences. So sometimes I have plenty of space for the orange thread, and sometimes I have to wriggle a bit to get it in between. And now I'm doing this with three colors, and I've also done it once with a rainbow of colors. The rainbow going outside towards the outside, and that looked really nice too. So this is a really nice way of mixing colors and making a colorful multi-layered motif. Now I have come to I've made the whole round coming back to the beginning, but these last orange stitches are rather big. Also, of course, because I was working towards the outside. And I think these are okay, but these are the stitches that are in the biggest danger of collapsing. And since there is no more round to go on top of them, this might be a good moment to fixate the orange stitches. And I do that by coming up halfway between the two spokes and making just a tiny stitch over the orange thread here, inconspicuous little stitch, just to fixate that last round. And make sure that these stitches will not collapse. And if you leave them alone, they will probably be okay, but especially when you're handling the fabric a lot because you're making a bigger piece, you see this might happen. And that doesn't look all that good. I'll rub them towards the outside again and fixate them. And now I don't have to be afraid of any collapsing. So with the blanket stitch, you have either the choice to do in the last round or row or whatever you're doing to make very small stitches, or if you end with big stitches, to fixate them like this. Just making the tiny stitch over the thread in the middle of the stitch. And I think I have two to go. Yeah. And now my last round of orange stitches is nicely fixated. And I can finish off. There are so many threads now that I don't have to make any knot or loop or anything. I can just go under, tuck the thread under, and it will be quite secure. So this is these motifs, but in multiple layers, and I think they have a really nice effect.